Hi, it's Chris from Mode, and today I'm going to show you how to build your brand new Mode Tempo. The Tempo is our first 60% symmetrical layout keyboard with loads of customizability from a variety of different colored chassis, a plethora of accents and weights, and plate materials to suit any preference. We do also have a written build guide with helpful photos if that's more your speed that you can also find linked below. The Tempo ships in a nice carrying case containing everything you need for the build. Inside the case you'll have the keyboard chassis, accent, and weight. You'll also have a fastener pack, daughterboard and daughterboard cable, rubber parts pack which includes the feet and mounting blocks, a screwdriver and keycap puller, a PCB, and plate. Refer to this image to ensure that you have all the necessary fasteners. If you opted for the optional foam kit, you'll have a separate packet containing your PE foam, case foam, and plate foam. In addition to these components, you'll also want to make sure that you have your MX style switches, keycaps, and stabilizers all ready, all of which you can find on the Mode website. To prepare for your build, we highly suggest lubing your switches and stabilizers for optimal typing sound and feel. We also highly recommend that you test your PCB regardless of if it is a hot swap or a solder PCB prior to building your board. We can't guarantee a replacement PCB that was not tested prior to assembly. Place the PCB face down and connect the daughterboard to the PCB. Be very careful to ensure you're plugging the cable in perfectly straight as to not bend the pins within the connector. Plug the daughterboard into your computer. On your browser, head to usevia.app. Under the Configure tab, click on Authorized Device and confirm authorization. This is where you can also change the layout, key bindings, and even the lighting of your PCB, but we'll come back to this later. Then navigate to the Key Tester tab and enable Test Matrix Mode. Using a pair of tweezers, you'll want to connect the metal contacts under each switch position and make sure that it lights up in VIA. This process is the same on both a hot swap and solder PCB. In the rare event that some keys do not light up, pause your build and contact support at modedesigns.com for help. Once you've confirmed that your PCB is fully functional, you can move on to the next step. Grab your keyboard chassis and place it face down. We recommend using the fabric sleeve that your keyboard arrives in to protect the face of your board during this building process. Align the silicone feet into the recessed circles on the back of the board. Press on the feet to ensure that they are properly inserted. Next, grab your Tempo weight and the bar feet. Push the bar feet into the back of the weight on both sides and align the weight to the back of the board. Ensure that the cutout of the weight matches the cutout on the chassis. We recommend inserting it from the top with the top of the board facing away from you and gently lowering it towards you. Screw in the weight with the 4 M2.5x3 button head fasteners. Next, grab the accent piece. Ensure the cutout of the weight matches the cutout for the USB port on the board. Align the accent piece along the top and hold it with one hand while screwing in the accent using the 3 M2.5x3 button head fasteners. If you're using the screwdriver, use caution to ensure that you don't accidentally scratch the chassis. We recommend using just a screwdriver bit to screw in the accent here instead. Once that's done, it's time to install the daughterboard. We recommend holding the daughterboard by the cable with the cutout facing downwards to properly align the daughterboard to the weight. Fasten the daughterboard into the weight using the 2 M2x3 socket head fasteners, being careful not to over tighten. And now we're going to start to build the internal assembly consisting of the plate, PCB, switches, stabilizers, and optional foams. We recommend using a fabric sleeve to rest your PCB on during this assembly. If you plan to use the optional PE foam, lay it on top of your PCB now. The foam kit for the Tempo is sold separately and contains PE foam, plate foam, and case foam. Now install your stabilizers. These are used for your larger keycaps like Shift, Enter, Backspace, and the spacebar to prevent rocking on these longer keys. For the Tempo, you'll need at least 2 2U stabilizers for Enter and Left Shift, and you'll need a third 2U stabilizer if you opt for the full Backspace option. You'll also need a 7U stabilizer for the spacebar. And before installing anything, you'll first want to choose your layouts. The Tempo has 2 hot swap PCB options, with one offering split backspace and the other offering full backspace. Both also support stepped or regular caps lock, which is mainly just for aesthetic purposes. The Tempo solder PCB supports both of these options in addition to split left shift and ISO enter. Now you might be wondering, which layout should you go with? Some fans of the smaller 60% layout prefer to use the split backspace, where caps lock is also typically remapped to control. The full backspace option offers a more traditional typing layout experience. Regardless of the option that you choose, keys are easily reprogrammable through VIA. It is highly recommended to pre-lube your stabilizers to prevent rattling sounds, and we'll leave a great guide linked in the description on how to best do that. To install your stabilizers, insert the non-threaded end of the stabilizer into the larger cutout on the PCB and pivot the threaded end into place. While holding it from the front, screw it into place from the underside of the PCB with your stabilizers included fasteners. Some optionally also come with washers that you can choose to use. And now it's time to install your switches. Before installing them, make sure to check that each switch's pins are perfectly straight. If they are bent, use tweezers to try and make them straight again. If you also picked up the optional plate foam for a more dampened sound, put it on top of your PCB now. Next, align your plate on top of your assembly. Now you can insert your switches. Regardless of if it is a hot swap or solder PCB, we recommend starting at each corner and carefully distributing your switches to ensure that the plate is seated properly. If you are using a softer plate material like POM, you'll want to pay extra attention to ensure that each switch is seated completely flat. You can use the tip of your screwdriver while pressing down the switch to carefully pull the plate upwards to ensure the switch snaps properly into place. If you have a hot swap PCB, we also suggest bracing the back of the hot swap socket while pushing the switch into place. Be sure that the switch is going in perfectly straight. If you have a solder PCB, now's the time to solder up your switches. Make sure that each switch is installed correctly. Check your PCB from the side and ensure that all switches are seated flat. Each mode tempo now comes with 4 different sets of lattice blocks, starting with full lattice mounting blocks for the most flexible typing experience, ranging all the way up to solid mounting blocks for a more responsive typing experience. You can easily mix and match these blocks to really fine-tune your personal typing experience. To install them, simply slide the mounting block into the recesses within the chassis as shown, with a total of 6 blocks. To ensure a proper fit, you can very carefully use the tip of a screwdriver to push the stem of the mounting blocks into place. At this point, you can also choose to use the optional case foam by inserting it into the chassis as shown. Next, insert your PCB and plate assembly into the case. To do this, hold the assembly with one hand and use your other hand to attach the daughterboard cable to the PCB. Again, taking care to insert it perfectly straight as to not bend the pins within. Gently lower the assembly into the chassis starting with the bottom edge followed by the top. Make sure that the plate is resting on the mounting blocks correctly. Secure the assembly to the chassis using the 2 M3x9 retaining fasteners with the rubber washers. These fasteners prevent the PCB and plate assembly from falling out of the keyboard when it is tipped over. We recommend keeping these very loosely installed to retain maximum flexibility. And finally, install your keycaps and check for any ticking on your stabilizers. If needed, tune your stabilizers by using a lubricant syringe to inject some Krytox 205G0 into the rear of the housing as needed. Be careful not to overdo it and use just a little bit of lube at a time. Again, we'll also leave a link to a great stabilizer tuning tutorial in the description down below. If you want to modify any key binding settings, head to usevia.app on your browser. Plug your board in and accept the prompt to authorize your keyboard. Under the Configure tab, you can remap any of your keys to other functions. And for those of you wondering, yes, you still have full control over your F-row, arrow keys, and nav cluster keys. Simply refer to the first layer in VIA to see where each of these keys are. To activate this first layer of keys, all you need to do is hold down the MO key, which stands for momentary, and you can now use any of the function keys mapped to layer 1 of your keyboard. And you can configure these in multiple different ways to whichever suits your personal preferences. And that's everything you need to know about your mode tempo. We hope you enjoy the board. For any technical questions, order help, or any other inquiries, feel free to join our Discord or email our support team at support@modedesigns.com.